Happy Monday, everybody, and Happy New Year. This is the first time I've been on a live in January, so I hope everybody's having a great Monday. This is going to be a cool live. I've got a friend of mine joining us, Greg Gurman. Let me see if I can get him in here right away. Hi guys, hey Jamie. LifeCraft, do you see? Oh man, I love it when it works like this. How are you, buddy?
I'm good, buddy. Just give me a hot sec here. I'm gonna get my
mic set up.
Camera figured out here.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool.
So you were the inspiration with the signage behind me. I don't know if you've seen this yet, Greg. This is what we ended up with after using the same company that you suggested. Oh no, I can't hear you now. You fit something.
Tell me now?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. That looks fantastic, buddy. I love it. So
Thanks,
cool.
Ben. Yeah, Brett set this up. So let me set this up for us. So Greg is a friend of mine. He is a licensed clinical hypnotherapist with a practice based out of Cochrane, Alberta, called LifeCraft.ca. And man, your story, you've been on here once before to share your story with us. And I think, you know, our community's grown. We've got all sorts of new people. I think what we need to do is talk about your journey as to how you got to hypnotherapy, because you were on a totally different path before this all started. And for anybody that might be watching the recording, I just want to let you guys know this is a fascinating story that ends up with Greg spending about 5 years in the penitentiary. His life and the trajectory that he was on was going through, you know, to the moon, and all of a sudden it was stunted. And I'll never forget the first conversation that we had, Greg. I remember something that you told me after telling me this like super compelling story. You go, honestly, Keegan, that my time in jail saved my life. And I think that's gonna, like, that to me is gonna take, you know, some, I don't know, I just find that to be so wild. So without further ado, man, please welcome. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful Monday. And let's get into it, man.
Beauty, yeah. Thanks, Keegan. Yeah. I'm so grateful to be here. I always love chatting with you guys. And, you know, leading into this, I was going back through some of your posts, and man, this community, this mindfulness community is so rad. You guys have such a clear and beautiful brand, and you guys have attracted incredible beings. If you want to see a group of people who are all on an amazing personal journey into a life of freedom and clarity and meaning and abundance that is their birthright, then this is a one-stop shop. So I'm always grateful to be here, always grateful to be talking to your people, and really proud to be associated with what you guys are doing here.
Thank you so much, man.
Yeah.
It's been wonderful to connect with you as well, and excited to see kind of what type of collaborations we can come up with in 2023.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of cool stuff in the pipeline. So yeah, like you said, you know, my story, I shared a bit about it last time I was here, and I'll share it again. And that's just because the work that we're doing here at LifeCraft, which is so aligned with what you guys are doing here at Mindful Meds in terms of bringing people into capacity, into freedom, and into the health that is our birthright. The story of my past informs why we do this work and how we do this work. And it also informs our work with therapeutic psychedelics and how we, you know, our clinical process for leading people through what we believe to be the most complete and powerful integration, because we use deep trance hypnotherapy and many other techniques. So that's what we'll do. We'll tell the story, and then from there, people will really have an embodied understanding of what we do and why and how it all fits together.
I love that, man.
Yeah. So, you know, I grew up here in Canada, in Alberta, and I was an achiever kid. You know, I was one of those kids I was pretty good in school, pretty good in sports, and I noticed that when I did well in things, my parents were very, very proud, and my coaches were very proud, and my teachers were very happy. And, you know, I wouldn't have been able to articulate this at the time, but at that young age, my sense of safety, my sense of belonging, my sense of value was very much tied to my performance, how I did in things, right? And so when I did well in things, I felt lovable, I felt enough. And when I didn't, I was not. And, you know, obviously we can see that type of an approach to life can lead you into some trouble. But when I was young, it only led me to success. And so I drove that hard, right? fully leaned into this idea. I was indoctrinated into the idea that happiness, peace, power, safety, these are achieved and earned out in the world by out competing and winning and beating others. And I drove that hard. So by the time I started university early, I went into pharmacology, which is a degree in medicine at the U of A. And everything was just go, go, go. I was driving super hard in everything I did. And I was on the treadmill, right? Always chasing those little things. And every time I'd win, every time I'd succeed at something, I'd feel good for just a flash of a second and then instantly feel empty, maybe even more empty than before, and be looking to the next thing on the horizon, always chasing. And so by the end of that first degree, Keegan, I had accomplished quite a lot, outwardly. Outwardly, I'd accomplished a lot. Of course, I was going nowhere in here, right? The only place that really matters. By the end of that first degree, I was a Team Canada bobsleigh athlete. I'd been a sprinter at the U of A for a couple of years. I was president of the faculty for a couple of years. I had my grades I was doing well, and I had started several businesses that did very well. So by the time I was 20, I was worth $5.5 million and had all this stuff, right? Could go anywhere I wanted to go. My garage had become a ridiculous museum of expensive things that were so important to me because I thought they were happiness, right? But I had this emptiness that had been stalking me for years, this blackness. And I could feel it getting closer. I could feel it, getting ready to pounce on me. And the only way to stay away from it was to keep achieving more and more, buying bigger things, accomplishing more and more. And, but it was getting closer and closer. And I felt very alone at this point in my life, I knew that I couldn't even tell my best friends that this doesn't really make sense to me anymore. I couldn't really tell my best friends, hey, sometimes I hate my life. Sometimes I feel worthless. I feel like nothing. They would have looked at me like I was an alien, right? Like, what are you talking about, dude? You're doing all the stuff that we're all trying to do, and you're killing it, right? And so by the end of that degree, Keegan, I started to feel resentful. I started to feel entitled. I didn't have enough character yet. I was still just a young guy, and I'd been following all the rules, doing all the stuff that people are telling you, you do this, you're going to be balling. You do this, you're going to be happy, successful. And I've been making sacrifices, working 80-hour weeks for years to get the grades, to do the stuff, be the athlete, volunteering, start the businesses, drive the businesses. And in the end, I felt like nothing, And there was this incredible imposter syndrome, this deep insecurity. My identity was protecting me, right? Because inside, I felt like a failure. I felt like a loser. And everybody thought I was this guy. Everybody thought I was this wealthy, successful, everything I touched turns to gold. And I was deeply afraid that people are going to figure out that I was, that I felt like nothing, right? Because I thought I was. And so by the end of that first degree, Keegan, I was kind of on tilt. I was starting to behave a little bit erratically. I was feeling resentful, and I kind of had a fucking attitude, right? Like spending large amounts of money on silly things, half trying to buy happiness, like throwing Hail Marys to try to find happiness, and half saying, fuck it, I don't care, I'll do whatever I want, just this type of an attitude. And, everything had become so sterile in my life. My relationships really didn't mean anything to me anymore. And nothing I was accomplishing meant anything to me anymore, but I couldn't stop running on the treadmill. As soon as I stopped achieving, I had this intense existential pain, this angst. So I had to keep running. But I could feel myself running out into the abyss. I could feel my habits and the way I was living my life slowly squeezing the life from me, squeezing the meaning from everything I did, but I couldn't stop, right? And so I'll backtrack really quickly. At the start of my degree, I was at a birthday party at a restaurant, and I got introduced to these guys who were, they had very wealthy families, and these guys were starting to take over some of their family businesses, and they were also getting into some illegal stuff. So they were buying drugs, like cocaine, in Mexico and the southern United States, and bringing it up into Canada and then wholesale selling it off. And I should say, like, I was such a straight arrow, Keegan. Like, I was an athlete, a student, and I never smoked weed in my life. And I was almost on a soapbox a little bit. Right? Like, if you're not doing everything you can to succeed, I can't even understand you. And these guys, I had just met them, and they found out I was doing pharmacology, and they asked me if I would chemically test their drugs for purity to tell them how pure the stuff is that they were getting. And I remember, man, like, my toes curled up in my shoes, and I was like, oh my God, like, I didn't even know any drug dealers, let alone these, like, drug lords that were moving huge. I couldn't even imagine it. And I remember like hoping someone would change the subject quickly. And I was like, oh, geez, that's not my thing. You know, it's really not for me. And the conversation moved on. I thought I was going to get shot in the parking lot. You know, like I was really scared to go to my car because I thought I know too much now. They can't let me go. But of course that didn't happen. And so over the course of that 4-year degree, that first degree, as I was telling you, I was going through this moral de-evolution. You know, I was focusing more and more out here, trying to fill this hole with stuff out here. And it weakened me, and it weakened my moral caliber and my ethical fiber. And it made me feel desperate. And it allowed me to justify doing crazy things. And that's eventually what happened. And so throughout that 4-year degree, I would run into these guys randomly here and there, you know, in public, at parties. And every time I ran into them, they were offering me more and more and more money. So I could see their operation was growing. But the answer was always an automatic no. Like I just couldn't reconcile how the identity that I held for myself could get involved in that kind of stuff. You know, like I'm going to be this doctor, I'm going to do this, I'm going to succeed in these ways. And that's not, you know, I can't even imagine doing that. But then by the end of that degree, you know, I was on tilt, right? And I was like kind of having a fucking attitude. And they found out, so one of the companies I'd started was a little trucking company. It started out with a single truck, a single 5-ton, single axle truck, doing shuttling and distribution between distribution centers and stores. And when everything got slow in 2008, we exploded because we had these cheap little trucks, right? And so I ended up having 14 trucks between Edmonton and Calgary, and then we expanded to Vancouver, bringing things in, and then I made a move down to the US, bringing stuff from Port of LA and Port of Long Beach up and then over. And I had to move down there for a few months to get everything set up, and these guys somehow found out I was moving down there and made me this huge offer. Right? They said, hey, look, if you test this stuff for us in Canada, once it's already come across the border, it's not easy for us to return it if we find out it's bunk, as they say, right? But if you test it down there, we can just not buy it, and then it saves us a lot of money. So they offered me, you know, a huge chunk of cash. It was about $800,000 they offered me, which sounds like a lot. Well, it is a lot of money, right? But the truth is, bro, at that point in my life, it wouldn't have changed anything. You know, like I was spending way more than that already, and it wouldn't have had a massive impact on my quality of life. But this is the mentality that I was stuck in, right? So sure, these other millions, they didn't make me happy. These other accomplishments, elections, you know, World Cup golds, these didn't make me happy. But this next thing, it will, right? You have to keep throwing the Hail Mary. You have to keep putting something on a pedestal, because otherwise you have to believe that it's never going to happen for you, right? And so in my head, I'm like, this money is finally going to be happiness for me. Right? And I learned, Keegan, that you can talk yourself into anything if there's a deep piece of you that believes it's what you need to feel the freedom, the peace, whatever you've been needing. Right? Yeah. And so I started romancing it to myself, right? I remember they offered me again. And I remember, because I'm now in the attitude I'm in, I allowed myself to consider it. And as soon as I did, I got this rush of emotion, right? Like, well, what if I did? What if I did this? You know, I got this wash of intensity.
Are you down there at this point?
No. No, I'm still at home. Yeah. You know, I had been so numb for so long, bro, that, you know, this thing, it was so intense and so foreign and so dangerous that it cut through the fog that I had created in my life unknowingly, and it made me feel something, you know. And so in kind of a strange way, it made me feel like a human being again. I felt something, and I remember feeling drawn in, and I remember up here going, don't do this. What are you doing, man? You can't do this. And I remember not caring. You know, I remember just like leaning in and feeling like I had this deep unmet need that was being satisfied. And so I hung out with them a little bit here and there, and then eventually agreed. And so they gave me this encrypted phone, and I took this encrypted phone down to the US with me and just left it plugged into the wall. So now I'm living in LA, downtown LA. And I had been down there for about 2 months and was pretty well done everything I had to do, getting everything set up, and I was getting ready to come home. And I was acting very ambivalent. Like, I don't care if the phone rings, you know, I'll just come home. But that wasn't true. You know, I had spent this money in my head, and this was finally happiness, right? This was finally going to be it. And so I really wanted that phone to ring, and one day it did. And so I went and met this guy outside of LA, and he had 6 little pieces of cocaine that were part of bigger shipments. And so I did chemical reactions on these and weighed the precipitates. and I left. And this is always a vivid part of the story for me. Like I get chills up my spine every time. So I'm driving down the 110 freeway in Southern California back to my ridiculously expensive downtown LA Wilshire Boulevard apartment that I just had to have for 2 months, right? In my BMW 328i that I just had to have for 2 months. Right? The thought of having a Honda Accord was unthinkable. I just wouldn't have done it. This is where I was, you know, a slave to my own identity that I had created. Right? And I'm driving down the freeway, and all of a sudden the palm trees start getting blurry, and like I start feeling this panic, you know, and the dam of denial that had been holding back the truth of what I allowed my life to do so suddenly, it broke, and it just smashed me. You know, I experienced this intense rage because I could remember, you know, doing the things I had done that had led me to here, but it's like I couldn't really remember having made the decisions. It just happened, you know, and I felt so powerful in so many ways in my life. And yet in the ways that really mattered, I was completely powerless. And it was the most deeply frustrating, enraging thing ever. And I felt hopeless. I felt like I was being nudged out of the driver's seat of my own life, and I didn't like where it was being steered, and I didn't feel like I could do anything about it. I didn't know when I was going to wake up again and have done something even worse, even more dangerous.
Wow.
And so I remember, like, I just wanted to quit everything. I wanted to pull the parachute on everything in my life, cancel everything. And of course, canceling my involvement here was no exception. I wanted to buy an island. You know, I actually almost did. Buy an island and say, fuck everyone, everything, I'm out. I won't do this anymore, and try to figure it out. You know. So I called these people who I knew back in Canada and said, hey, here's your purity numbers for this shipment, and I'm out, guys. I can't do this anymore. And by then we had enough rapport. I knew I could just walk away. Like I knew it wouldn't be dangerous for me. And they knew that I wasn't going to say anything. And so I did. And I totally cut ties. I felt just icky and weird about the whole thing. And now my identity was involved again. And my identity wouldn't allow me to accept any money. So I just didn't accept anything from these guys. I came back home, totally cut ties. And I kind of had my own little rock bottom. You know, I had this whispering in the back of my head that there has to be more to life. There has to be more to being a man than achieving and winning and buying and owning. And so I went on my own little journey. You know, I remember I tried yoga, but I just couldn't get into it. You know, like I remember I'm like, we're going to do this for 45 minutes. And it just didn't make sense to me, right? Because I was so in the material paradigm. And I tried meditation, but it just took too long. I wanted somebody to tell me the 5 steps to enlightenment, and then I could do that faster than anybody else. So I thought, right? But that's not how these things work, right? You can't power steer these things. And so before long, Tegan, I just gave up, man. I kind of just fell back onto this monorail of materialism that I'd created my life to be. And again, I could feel myself dying. I could feel myself being carried out into nothingness, complete disconnection from any meaning of any kind. But I couldn't stop, you know, because stopping was painful in the moment, right? And so that's how it went. And I had kind of just resigned. Like, I don't know what's going to happen in my life. I'm just going to keep making money and becoming a shell.
Wow.
I didn't know where else to
So
turn.
now are you at this point feeling worse after you've done the testing than you were going into the testing? Like, has this become, are you in a deep, dark depression at this stage?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, it's kind of hard to quantify when it was worse and when it was better, because I kept coming up with new coping mechanisms, and I was able to create a reality, as we all do from time to time, my own reality where things could make sense to me and I could be a good person. And that reality was not aligned with what was really happening. And whenever we do that, we suffer, right? So it's fair to say that I was on a downward trajectory here, and I'd been home after doing that. I'd been home for about 8 months, and I had a trip planned back to the US to glad hand some of our bigger clients. We just signed a couple big contracts for textiles and some gypsum stuff. We had stuff moving in both directions, and I wanted to put some face time in and make some personal relationships with people. And so was going to fly back to the US, and some of the people who I had met living in LA were having a wedding in Vegas, and the timing just worked out. So I flew to Vegas. So plane lands in Vegas, and this is when the Wynn Hotel was brand new, and I had this like $1,800 suite a night, and you know, I was going to do this, and you know, we had people coming and girls, and I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to be happy after this, right? I'm going to be happy. I think, yeah, this is happiness, right? So plane lands in Vegas, and I turn on my phone, and my phone's just ding, 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 and I remember being so proud of that, right? And I'm going through my messages, oh, I'm doing deals, and I'm a big deal here. And after maybe 10 minutes, I noticed that people who had stood up on the plane to get their bags are sitting back down again, and I'm wondering what's going on. So I look out the window, and we're not pulled up to the terminal. Like, I can see Vegas, I can see desert, but it's like we're in the middle of the runway or something, right? But I don't care. I got stuff to do, right? And a few minutes later, 4 police cars surround the plane with their lights on. And I'm not thinking anything, right? It's been 8 months, and I completely compartmentalized that. Nobody in my life knew that I did that. My girlfriend, nobody knew. And I've been actively denying it, right? I never did that. I'm not a dirtbag, you know? And I actually started making jokes, right? I knew some people on the plane, like, oh, who's a terrorist? Ha, ha, ha. Who's got a bomb? Ha. And then I'm back on my phone, and I feel this shadow come over me in the aisle, and I look up, and it's this like 7-foot tall, shaved head DEA vest. He says, "Are you Greg Gurman?" And I'm still not thinking anything, bro. Right?
Wow.
I go, "Yeah, like, how can I help you?" Right? And this cat snatched me up, and you know, like I was 245 pounds and lean, coming off the bobsleigh team. And this guy picked me up by the outside of my shoulders, bro, and carried me off the plane. My feet didn't touch the carpet. I was not accustomed to that. And tackled me down on the runway. Like, they had these rickety steps beside the plane. Tackled me down on the runway and cuffed me behind my back. And of course, now I know exactly what this is. Right? This is the only illegal thing I'd ever done in my life. So they put me in the back of this black FBI car that was kind of parked partly under the plane. And whew, now I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So this FBI agent gets in the back seat beside me, and he says, "Do you know what this is about?" And I lied. I'm like, "No. What the hell is going on here? This is crazy." And he said, "Just shut the fuck up." And he put his phone in front of my face and started scrolling through pictures. So the guy who I had met to test this stuff for, just outside of LA, he had just before that, like not long before that, been arrested crossing the border from Montana into Saskatchewan with a false bottom bed pickup truck with, I think, 144 kilos of coke slid in there. And he had flipped. And so I found out in my discovery that when I went back to Canada after that, I was under very high level surveillance. They had the van outside my house with 2 agents around the clock. My phone, my sister's phone, my parents' phones, everyone's was tapped. My bank accounts are monitored. They were following me everywhere, to and from school, to and from my businesses. But because I had truly cut ties, right, turned out to be not very effective use of taxpayer money, I guess. But in the U.S., it's different. They want their pound of flesh, right? And so they take me to the FBI headquarters in Las Vegas. It's just like you see in the movies. You know, I'm chained to the table with the two-way glass. And this is a joint investigation between RCMP and DEA and FBI. And so these American agents are out in the hallway on the phone with RCMP detectives, and then coming back in like, "Hey, do you know this person, you know that person?" So I had to make some quick decisions. Right? The charges were crazy to me, coming from the Canadian system. Right? In the U.S., they have these conspiracy laws, so they can charge you for the sum total of anyone they can connect you to. And so I was, from those 6 grams, bro, I was charged with 1,800 kilograms of cocaine and 1 million ecstasy pills and 1,000 pounds of weed and a bunch of guns. So I'm going, what? And so my charges, you know, in the federal system in the US, there's no parole. So my charges were mandatory minimum 10 years to maximum life. And if you get 10 years, it's 10 years. And if you get life, it's your life. There's no parole. So I'm going, what? Right? Like, I was about to spend a night at the Wynn and, you know, have a $20,000 weekend. And now they're telling me I might go to prison for the rest of my life. Like, I'm like, what? So then they come in and they go, "Hey, you don't have to go down for this." They said, "We had confidential informants involved before you and after you. We know you only had this one point of contact. We know that you didn't accept any money for this." They said, "You don't go down for this." They said, "We're going to take away your passport. You go about your trip here in the US. And when you're ready to fly back to Canada, there will be a handler somewhere on the plane. You won't know who it is. And when you land in Edmonton, you'll be assigned an RCMP handler. And you will continue to meet the people you know and liaise with this RCMP handler. And if you do this, no one will ever know about this. No charges, no nothing." And they offered me $250K pretty quickly. They're trying to flip you quickly, right? Because if you fly somewhere and you vanish for 10, 15 hours, you're burnt, right?
Gotcha.
So like I said, I had to make some some tough choices, right? And at this point in my life, Keegan, my identity was everything to me, right? What people thought about me, people thought of me as this guy, that was everything to me. It was, I was nothing. I was nobody without that. And I would have thought that at this point in my life, I would have pushed an innocent person down an escalator to keep people from finding out what I had done. But the last 8 months of me feeling myself drifting out into the abyss, it had slowly been marinating me into the realization that I didn't know how to save my own life. I didn't have it all figured out. And I didn't have the tools or the perspective or the strength to make big change. My life had become a runaway train. And so I somehow had the grace to acknowledge that this might be what I was manifesting. I knew that to get free from this incredibly deep rut that I built for myself, I had to have the rug pulled out from under me. I needed my teeth smashed in to get free of this. And I knew I wouldn't be able to do that myself. I would never do that myself. And so I had a moment of grace, as I said, and I decided that I just couldn't remember anyone's name. And they really don't like that. They don't like that at all. And it's not very common in the US because they make big threats to make you talk. And if you don't talk, they follow through on those threats, right? So basically instantly, I'm out of there. I'm in the back of this black unmarked Suburban inside a cage, speeding off to prison. And now my moment of strength has passed, right? And I'm like, I'm just kidding. I'll tell you anything. I'll tell you guys everything I know. But luckily it was too late.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
What's that, brother?
You say luckily it was too late. That is wild.
Yeah. So they take me to jail, right? And like, it's crazy. Like the thought of spending 5 minutes in the drunk tank for me was incomprehensible. Like, no, I'm never going to jail. So this is just craziness to me. And those first couple of weeks, the whole reason I tell this story, Keegs, is because the first couple of weeks in prison, they were just massively painful. Everything that I was gone, right? Like the media was quite hard on me. I wasn't a celebrity by any means, but having been president of the faculty and doing some high level athletics, Team Canada athletics, they like to crucify people, right? So, and because I didn't talk, a lot of the case got put on me. So I had very little involvement. Like what I just told you was all I did, but I was the kingpin in some ways because they weren't able to arrest anybody above me. And so, the media was quite hard on me, and my identity, all my stuff was gone. They confiscated everything I owned, my businesses, everything as proceeds of crime, even though they knew that wasn't true. So they liquidated money and assets, millions and millions of dollars in stuff. And so I lost everything that I thought was important for happiness, everything I thought I needed to be who I was. And I remember just floating around in this prison like I was nobody. I was nothing. I was just pain. I was just pain in a body that meant nothing to anybody. And I felt so pathetic and so broken. And that stuck with me for a couple of weeks. And then I had this incredible peace wash over me. And at first I thought, this is just the white noise of total overwhelm. Like I just can't feel anything anymore. My nerves are shot. And that's what this peace is. But this peace had stuck with me, bro, for months. And I had to acknowledge something was happening here. Something was going on. And I remember walking around, these first few prisons that you're in, these jails, they're rough spots, like everyone's high strung, everyone's stressed out. Most people are fresh into the system. Most people haven't been sentenced yet. So there's a lot of tension and a lot of fights. Like I was getting in fights constantly and people are getting killed. People are committing suicide constantly. We're wearing dirty prison scrubs with like crusty cum stains on them because they don't do laundry very well. And you're not sleeping, you're eating rotten potato stew. And yet I felt this incredible sense of love and enoughness. I had this deep, deep confidence, this certainty that everything was going to be okay, even though I had no evidence of that whatsoever, And I remember feeling love for myself and the other men in there. And I was just, every moment was a sweet nectar. It was just incredible. And I didn't know what this was. It felt somehow so familiar. It felt somehow so consistent and real. But I didn't want to ask questions because I didn't want to mess it up. I didn't want to be in that place without it. Yeah. And so I just cruised like this for a couple months, but eventually the feeling started to fade. And I remember trying to hold on to that peace, that love, that enoughness. But the harder I held on to it, the faster it, it's like sand through the fingers, right? And pretty soon I was back to feeling busted, walking around in jail feeling like a complete loser, like just an absolute dickhead. And I hope my family just forgets about me because I'm a burden, I'm a piece of garbage. And, it's funny, actually, when this all happened, I had to call home. And I remember calling home just to tell my parents, you guys can forget about me. I understand. If you guys never want to see or hear about me again, I get it. And of course, that's not what happened, not even close, but that's where I was. I was living in a world where if I'm not producing, if I'm not smarter and wealthier than every man in this room, I am nothing. And if I'm not smarter and wealthier than everyone my parents know, then I have betrayed. I've let them down, right? And it's madness. It's crazy. But that's where I had gotten to. Slowly, the ratchet had slowly spun me there, And so that piece left me, and I was back to feeling busted, Keegan. And it took me the next 3.5 years in prison to figure out what that was. And it was this. From a very young age, I had built this identity in the image of who I thought I needed to be enough, to be loved. And every single thing I did in my life was for and through that identity, right? And so when you do this, a couple of things happen. One is you can never charge your batteries. Nothing means anything to you because you're achieving things for a self-created figment that's not real. It doesn't exist anywhere outside of this little space right here. And it'd be no different than you and someone very different from you swapping goals lists. You might achieve everything on their goals list and get to the end and go, I don't, and that's what happens. So we never charge our batteries. We can drive on the treadmill and blow calories and energy out the tailpipe and get nothing, right? And yet not be able to get off the treadmill because we can't escape the illusion that happiness is going to be achieved by fulfilling an ego-based identity. And the other thing that happens when we live this way, bro, is we can never be in the moment. And in the moment is where we experience our fully human life. It's where we have all of our power. It's where the bliss of surrender and truth exists. And when you live through an identity, you can't interface with your life in the moment. Anytime something happens, someone says something, you have to run the algorithm first. What would my identity say and do and think about this? And then you come with a response. Hey, check this out. I need you to know that I feel this way about this thing, right? And it's like we're living in the matrix, right? There's a separation between yourself and any authentic experience. And these two things together mean that we die. We die slowly, right? We talk about our basic human needs as being food, water, shelter, but I think there's another, and it's truth and meaning. And I think without those things, we suffer without exception. And so I realized that my ego being evacuated by my arrest was the most beautiful gift I've ever received, even though I was kicking and screaming, right? I would have done anything. I would have cut off an arm to keep from losing that identity that I thought was keeping me safe. And it turned out to be the most beautiful gift because I experienced this piece of just being me. I didn't even know that was a thing. I could just be me. And because of how publicly my identity had been destroyed, I didn't have to uphold anyone's expectations. I didn't have to be anything for anyone, and the freedom, the bliss of that in the moment was magical. But I didn't realize the gift I'd been given, right? And pretty soon I started to feel naked without my identity. And I started to build another one. So this is why that feeling started to fade on me, right? I remember walking around a prison now. This won't be my legacy. I'm going to rise from these ashes, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to write this book, and I'm going to be this guy. And now I'm already starting again in prison. Hey, check this out. Know me, bro. This is what I'm about. And instantly, I can feel the separation from truth, from bliss, from the fully human experience, right? And so, my time in prison was like a monastery for me. Like what you said at the beginning. I read hundreds of books, and I spent thousands of hours in meditation. And I made a commitment to myself going in that I was going to give everything I had left to getting back to being the man that I knew I could be, the man that my community deserves, my family deserves. And so I went all in on that, and I started with responsibility. Like I knew most guys at that stage, they're like, oh, it ain't my fault, I got snitched on, this is bullshit. And I felt like I was the only one who was like, I did it, I did this, I fucked up, and just fully surrendering to whatever path the universe had for me. And so when I came home, I was so free, right? It's so ironic to say, but I got free in prison. When I came home, I was so connected to my heart, and it was just slapping me in the face how so many people I loved, so many people in the world were experiencing this lack inside, this disconnection inside, but misinterpreting that as a need for a bigger boat, a hotter partner, a better job, more stuff, right? And pursuing that out here, right? And so my medical education wasn't very usable to me with a narcotics felony, unfortunately. I still feel like I'm talking about somebody else when I say that. But I felt this call to serve. I felt like I had this clarity of the cosmic truth that we as human beings, we are these incredibly unique souls with a unique collection of gifts and skills and passions and a unique track of experience in this life. And all those things intersect at purpose. Nothing that's ever happened to us is an accident. Everything that's ever happened is empowering us in some way, bringing us new perspective, allowing us to let go of other things. And I believe that when we come into purpose in our lives and we move love and energy through our gifts in purposeful ways, it's there that we experience the most meaningful, fulfilling existence as a human being. I call that being fully human. And because the way the universe is built, when we're in purpose, we're contributing the most we can, both energetically and tangibly to the world. We're manifesting the most abundance too. And so a life in purpose is the fullest human life you can imagine and the most abundant, safe life available to you. And so from that belief, I founded LifeCraft. And over the years, I've been expanding how we help people come into clarity of purpose, and then we support them in building their life in alignment with and an expression of that purpose. And so LifeCraft therapy is something that I've been developing over many years, about 8,000 clinical hours. And the backbone of LifeCraft therapy is clinical hypnotherapy. And I've discovered that when we apply many other psychotherapeutic modalities that we may have heard of within a deep trance state, we have incredible traction. And when we approach this from a spiritual framework, which is that we are all these beautiful, unique souls on these rich journeys, and everything that's happened to us is an opportunity for us to step into more power, into more grace, self-compassion, for us to live more fully, and in doing so, experience the unfuckwithability that is your birthright. Yeah. And so a LifeCraft therapy session is 2 hours, and we are able to treat a wide variety of things: addiction, depression, PTSD, including treatment-resistant depression and recalcitrant PTSD. We work with anxiety and all manner of behavior change, and typically a single session is all that's required, because we go deeply into trance. We find the deep roots of any particular unconscious belief that is self-limiting, and we're able to reframe and release that, and then reinstall beliefs that are in alignment with your soul's call forward, so that when you come out of a hypnotherapy session, things you naturally feel called to do and the lenses through which you naturally see the world are all truth, all aligned with your soul. And so the current of life is flowing you in the direction you feel most expressed, and your life is fully human, right? You're in freedom. So that's a quick snippet on LifeCraft therapy. We can circle back to that in a minute, but what I'd love to do now, Keegan, is talk about where our work and your work really intersects, and that's around the incredible power of therapeutic psychedelic usage.
Yeah, man, that story, that's the third time I've heard it. It hits me in the heart every single time. Dude, thank you so much for going deep on that. It's so inspiring. And I think so many of us can relate to that, just that ego part of us that just wants to win, and look like the man. I mean, I definitely went through that in my early 20s. And it honestly led to addiction. So it didn't lead to jail, but it led to addiction, and I can totally relate to that, man. So let's get into it. But I'm curious, before we do, when did you get into the hypnotherapy part? You're doing all this meditation while you're in prison, and did something kind of call you to this during that, all that meditation, or how did you transition once you got out into the hypnotherapy? Did it happen right away? Was there some time that it took before, walk us through how we got there, and then I'm really excited to chat with you about how we intersect. That really is the purpose of this call, but man, that story gets me. Thank you.
Sure, brother. Yeah, that's a great question. So when I got home, I went from having a net worth, as I said, of several $1 million and more than $1 million in liquid cash. Went from that to debt, right? Because they took everything. And my lawyer fees and stuff, and were just, it was a disaster, basically. So I got home with debt, and I was so disenchanted with money and the material pursuit in life that I just wanted to get a good, hardworking job with good salt of the earth people and just get back into society, right? Like when I came home, bro, I didn't know if I'd remember how to drive. I couldn't remember any radio stations. Like, it was crazy to be coming back into life. And I had some real concerns about how I would integrate. Like, prison is a very violent place, and you can't have any hesitation in your game. And I come from years of being in a place where someone says a certain word to you and you got to go now. Like, you have to be, you have to live a certain way, and that's not a healthy way to live. And it's not a way that is going to serve you at all, or the people who deserve you in our free world, right? So I didn't know how I didn't know how I'd be able to integrate, and so I was taking it pretty slow. Luckily, it was very natural for me. I never had any problems. I never had any, violence issues at all, ever.
Yeah.
But I got a job on the rig, man. So I got a job on a rig, and I just went to work, working long, straight 12-hour shifts, typically like 21 to 24 days in a row. And then I'd get a week off-ish and go back up again, and paid down all my debts. And along the way was collecting certifications, right? So before I went away, I was in pharmacology, and I had done several courses in psychology along the way, and neuroendoimmunomodulation, all kinds of neuroscience courses. And I had also done quite a bit of trauma training. I was a volunteer on the addictions hotline and the suicide hotline. And so when I got home, I just started building on that. And I felt a disenchantment with the standard medical system by the time I got home. And that's only increased over the last several years, especially the last 2 years. And because of what had happened to me, I was no longer a part of that traditional medical system, which I was regretful about at the beginning, but in the end, it's given me a ton of freedom to pursue what I believe to be a truly powerful psychotherapeutic modality that is in service of everybody. And it's something that Big Pharma is never going to get behind because it's so efficacious, right? A single session, you can be free, and that's going to cost Big Pharma a lot of money, right? So I began with neurolinguistic programming and became an NLP master. And then that led me naturally into hypnotherapy, which is a natural extension of NLP tools, and took several different hypnotherapy trainings, both here and in Europe, and then had enough clinical hours to get my level of clinical hypnotherapy. And along the way, I picked up trainings in polyvagal theory, in cognitive behavioral therapy, and I became a Reiki master, and also I took several coaching certifications. So I'm now at a master's level, duly certified health and life coach. And all these things, in different ways, support a LifeCraft therapy session, right? A LifeCraft therapy session is something where we quarterback these tools in very individual ways, and we use Reiki and deep trance tools to completely set you free from self-limiting beliefs that are holding you back. This unconscious mind, which drives almost everything in our life. 95% of our behavior, 85% of our behavior and 95% of our thoughts are driven by this unconscious mind. And luckily, this is software, not hardware, right? And so we can change those things. They don't change on their own, and they don't change because you want them to, right? This is why people can't just get free of an addiction because they want to, right? This thing is driving your behavior, and you don't have the power in the moment. You have the power in the chair, where you can reset these things, and then you can be free. And so that's how I came to be doing what I'm doing. And it's been a real journey of surrender, Keegs. Like, getting home from prison, I didn't know what I was going to do. I couldn't even imagine who would want to be my friend. What woman would be interested in me? I slowly started meeting people, and I was thinking, like, gee, I hope they don't ask me what I've been doing the last 7 years.
Is that how long you were in there? 7 years?
Not totally, no. So I was sentenced to 92 months, which is 7 years, 8 months. And I did about 3 years in the US. And then I was accepted. I would have done the whole thing, but I was accepted for something called a treaty transfer, which allowed me to come back to Canada in custody. Right. So I went into Drumheller prison here in Alberta, which was like deeply humbling. I've driven past that lots as a kid and been like, oh, who's in there? Like, what kind of psychos are in there? And here I am, man, mid-20s, wearing my belly chains and my ankle chains, getting marched up into Drumheller prison. And then I was paroled from there, and then I did the back half of my sentence on parole.
Wow.
In Canada, yeah. So,
so let's go to the hypnotherapy now.
Yeah.
And for anybody tuning in or watching this for the first time, by the way, my name is Keegan, and I'm the founder of Mindful Meds. If you're just tuning in, this is a friend of mine, Greg Gurman, the founder of LifeCraft, who's just shared an incredible story about going to a penitentiary and coming back out and having all these gifts and now using those to better other people's lives. But I think a lot of us, including me, don't really have an understanding of what hypnotherapy really is. And I know you kind of just softly touched it there. What's up, Jordy? Tell us a little bit about, just like a little synopsis about hypnotherapy, what the data is saying, because I know you're a really data-driven human being. I've gotten to know you quite well this year. And maybe like what the science is telling us about hypnotherapy, why you're super excited about it. And then I want to wrap in how we're going to combine mushrooms and hypnotherapy. If that works for you.
Yeah, that's great. And so just before that, I'll say that I'm going to be coming your guys' way later in the month. I'm going to be there from about the 17th to the 20th. And I've left a bunch of room in my schedule in case anybody within your community feels called to this work and is interested to give it a try. And so if that's you, I'll just say that now so that as you're listening to this, if there's a party that's thinking, hey, this might be something that can set me free or can help me on my journey, then I'd be happy to chat. And the first step is a free consultation. So we'll set that up so that anybody who feels called for, they can book a consultation. So yeah, so hypnotherapy. So basically, Keegan, in hypnotherapy, we gain access to the unconscious mind. So why is that important? Well, we divide into conscious and unconscious. Your conscious mind is where you exist, right? It's where you hold your identity. It's where you interface with the world. So everything you ever have or ever will experience is up here. But the unconscious mind, it holds all the beliefs and the filters that determine what information from your environment gets to here and how that information is filtered, twisted, changed, and manipulated before it gets to here. And so that means this unconscious mind has a huge power in your life. We tend to think we have a lot of autonomy as adults, right? Like, yeah, I ate that because I wanted to, and I said that because I wanted to. But the truth is that by the time you're aware that you're about to say, do, think, emote something, it's already been decided down here for the most part. And so the way this unconscious mind works, its only job is to keep you safe. One job, keep you safe. And so throughout your life, anytime you've experienced any negative emotion, fear, rage, powerlessness, anytime you felt unloved, unseen, unwanted, this thing springs into action and it scans. What's the cause of this? What's the cause? And when it finds what it thinks is the cause, it goes, this. I will never let this happen again. And an unconscious belief is formed. And so as we go through our life, our constellation of unconscious beliefs becomes more and more complex, which means that our behavior and the way we experience our lives and ourselves becomes constrained and contained in more complex ways. Yeah. And so this unconscious mind is incredibly simplistic. This is an ancient artifact, right? We call it the critter brain because we have this in common with reptiles. It's a very simplistic piece of equipment. It's fight or flight. It's meant to keep us safe. And so it oversimplifies, right? We today are these incredibly advanced, socially complex, spiritually ascending, highly intelligent beings, but we have to have this human experience in a primitive meat suit. And this primitive meat suit sometimes gets it wrong. So this thing will form beliefs in error all the time. For instance, you might be young and something happens, and the only way this can make sense of what happens is I must be unlovable, or I must be a burden to my parents, or safety is never available to me. I'll never be safe. And now the unconscious mind takes on that belief. And the way the unconscious mind works, Keegan, once it takes on a belief, that belief is with you for life until you change that belief, which can only be done in trance. So this is transcendental meditation. This is psychedelic experiences, deep trance hypnotherapy. Some yoga can bring us into deep trance states. You cannot consciously change an unconscious belief. No amount of talk therapy, willpower can change it. And so what that means is for most of us, we've got this unconscious mind who thinks it's loving us by driving us to an addiction, by driving us to a particular behavior, by forcing an experience of ourselves in the world that is not authentic, that is not empowering, not true. Making us believe you're not safe, you're not enough, you're not lovable, whatever it is. In this work, we're able to systematically identify any self-limiting unconscious beliefs, and we're able to reframe them. We have a broad set of tools for reframing and releasing those beliefs and then replacing them with beliefs that are in alignment with the truth of who you are. And when we do that, now you come out of a LifeCraft therapy session and your experience of yourself in the world has changed. You're experiencing the same things, but you're interpreting information in different ways. And so it is the only way to instantly and properly change deeply driven behavior, which is most behavior, and certainly all behavior related to safety and survival. Right?
Wow. And did you say 85% of the decisions you make today are based on your subconscious and 95% of your thoughts?
Yeah, 85% of your
subconscious? Wow.
Basically, the stuff you have autonomous in the moment control over is the meaningless stuff, right? Like, do I want regular fries or curly fries? Like that's the kind of stuff that you're really driving. everything else is about safety and survival, which is driven down here. And we're very good at justifying things in the conscious mind, like, well, yeah, I did that because of this, and this, but that's probably not why. That's the logic you're applying to what you're doing, but your behavior is being driven by deeper things that are often trauma-based, and we can change them. And the beautiful part is that after we do this work, after we set you free, after we connect you with the cosmic truth of your enoughness, your worthiness, the changes that we've made are as stubborn, as unchangeable as those old beliefs, right? And so no willpower is required. After a hypnotherapy session, you don't need to, burn your willpower to not eat something you don't want to be eating anymore or whatever. It's just automatic, right? Your unconscious mind can see that safety for you is not that thing it thought it was. Safety for you is actually being connected to your gifts in full expression. And now it's driving you in that direction, right? And so this segues nicely into the psychedelics, and the creation of LifeCraft therapy has been a journey of surrender for me. I never thought coming home that I never knew what I'd be doing, but I certainly never thought I'd be building this beautiful and unique clinical model. And I've just continued to surrender as the universe has put things in front of me. And the psychedelic work is the same. Coming out of prison for drugs, if you would have told me, hey, you're going to be facilitating psychedelic retreats, I would have said, you're crazy, man. Like, no way will I do this. Right now, I have a wife and 3 beautiful little kids. And I just thought, no way would I ever do this. But the universe kept presenting it to me. And by that time, I was a little bit more seasoned on the journey of surrender. And I very quickly just surrendered in. And essentially, the way it went, Keegan, was that in my clinical practice, I started getting a lot of referrals from psychiatrists and psychologists who were working with people that couldn't do anything for anymore. They were reaching the end of the road. Right? They were maxed out on their drugs. Shock therapy wasn't working for them. And unfortunately, today, the system has evolved to recommending suicide for these types of people, which is just incomprehensible. Yeah. But anyway, these people were being referred to me, and we were able to help them. And that's because the problem they had wasn't, they didn't need more masking from drugs. They needed to connect with their soul and experience firsthand in a session how fucking beautiful and incredible they are, how they're a big soul that came here for a gritty journey, but they have everything, and it's so meaningful. And so pretty soon, a lot of these clients being referred to me had psychedelic experiences because ketamine was making an inroad into Western psychiatry. And these people would often come out of a LifeCraft therapy session and go, holy shit, that was so much like this ketamine psychedelic trip that I did. Except in our work, we have a bit more intention, right? We can be a little more intentional, we can guide, and we can tie the bow around things a little bit more cleanly. And so my interest was piqued, and I ended up being connected with a couple that had a therapeutic use exemption for doing psychedelic work, and I hypnotized both of them, and they had the same experience, and then I went and did a journey with them, and it was incredible. We're running short on time, so I'm going to move faster. But
we're not, buddy. If this goes over by 5 or 10,
oh, perfect.
Let's get it all in.
Okay.
Something just happened with the audio, though. It sounds a little fuzzy, or maybe that's gone now. Okay, I think it's gone.
Can you hear me now?
I heard like a white noise, almost like a fan.
You got me now, buddy?
I can.
Yeah,
it still has that little something's going on, just some type of distortion. But Greg, one of the things that we got to loop back to is, Case, really, really well said about the hypnotherapy. By the way, Greg is coming through British Columbia. We're in Vernon. I believe you and I are going to connect. Is it January 17th you're going to be here? I'll have to look at my schedule, but I think it's the 17th you and I are. I'm doing a hypnotherapy session with Greg. And for anybody interested, please reach out. Greg has offered me a commission code to share with everybody, and I politely turned it down. I said, why don't we just offer the discount to the community? And so anybody that's interested in the work that Greg's doing, if this is resonating with anybody in BC, he's going cross-province, starting in Cochrane, I think hitting up all sorts of little towns, including Golden, and then kind of coming through Vernon. Will you get all the way to Vancouver? Because I know some guys that might be interested in this in Vancouver. So now, if you don't mind, Greg, let's talk about the other side of this conversation. Because about a year ago, I came to one of your retreats, and you were one of the first people really that I had ever heard of that was doing the hypnotherapy and synergistically using mushrooms as well. So plant medicine plus hypnotherapy, it was quite the experience. And so you're doing journeys now, and you've got a ton of experience with these journeys, and it's really come a long way. You've learned a ton about this over the past couple of years. And it sounds like it's really taken off for you. And I think a lot of people here might be interested in the macro dosing mushroom side of things. And I think they'll be interested in the hypnotherapy stuff too. I know I am. But that intersection, how they collide, is pretty unique. And it's not really being done anywhere in the world today. So why don't we speak about that?
Absolutely, yeah. So yeah, like you said, I'm going to be coming through. So from the evening, I'll be in Golden and Revelstoke on the 16th, and then coming west from there. So from the 17th to about the 20th, I'll be in Kelowna and Vernon. And then I'm heading on to Vancouver, mainland Vancouver. Then I'm on the island. I'm on Bowen for a couple of days, Gold Coast for a couple of days, and then coming back through Kamloops, because there's a couple heli ski operations that I work with around trauma care. And so that's the loop. So for anybody who's in BC, who's interested in either LifeCraft therapy, as I just described, or any of the therapeutic psychedelic work that we do that I'm about to share, yeah, I'd love to connect with you. I'd love to see if I can support you on your journey of life. So yeah, so I met this couple that was doing therapeutic use exemption stuff, and I gave them both LifeCraft therapy sessions, and they also said, wow, that's so much like the psychedelic work. And so I did a journey, and it was incredible. I had no experience with it whatsoever, and it just blew me open. Like, I had tons of past life experiences, craziness. And I remember being in the retreat center after my journey, eating the berries that they've got for us there, and my heart was so open, bro. It reminded me of coming home from prison, right? Which I had lost a little bit. Like, the world kicks us around a bit, and it's work, being in this world and staying free, right? My heart was open. I was imagining getting home and hugging my wife and holding my kids, and I was weeping in the retreat center thinking about that. And yeah, I just felt so safe to love the world so completely and fully, and it was just beautiful. And then a couple hours later, as I pulled up on my driveway, that was gone. I was still happy to see my family, as I am every day, but that bliss and that complete freedom, it was gone. And I could feel my unconscious mind, oh, slow down, bro. It's not that safe to love that much. Just chill, man. You got to, it's not safe for you to be that open and free. You're going to get hurt. The world's not safe, right? And I thought, wow, isn't this interesting? As someone who specializes in behavior change, I remember thinking, there's got to be a way to integrate that bliss, because that bliss, that love, that fullness that we experience on a journey, that's the truth, right? Fear and lack and vulnerability, or I should say fear and vulnerability, that's an illusion, right? We are all these beautiful, immortal souls. And when we surrender into the truth that we are full, we are complete, ironically, then we gain all of our power. We're manifesting safety in every way. And so I began experimenting with that. And I began, working with friends and family first, and doing psychedelic journeys, and then using LifeCraft therapy to integrate those experiences. And, that's been several years now in the process. And what we have today is something that we're very proud of. It's a system where people do a psychedelic experience, and we have a lot of work leading in. We use a lot of neurolinguistic programming and hypnotherapy leading in to bring you into capacity, into groundedness, so that you can fully experience and surrender into these beautiful psychedelic experiences. And we know that surrender is so important on these journeys, right? Because we all reach that intersection where reality is starting to break down, your identity is starting to break down, and you can either hold on and then, go for a tougher ride, or you can let go and experience the truth of who you really are, right? And we have a high success rate with that because of all the work that we do leading in. And then after a journey, we use LifeCraft therapy in several different ways. We use it for imprinting. So immediately after your journey, this is something a little bit new from what you guys did last year. We bring people into a state of trance, and we imprint on your unconscious mind the bliss, the freedom, the truth that you just experienced, and turn that into your natural state, your default state, so that you never have to work so hard for that love, right? The trauma train doesn't leave the station so easily.
Wow.
And then we do integration work afterwards. So we let people go between 7 and 21 days after a journey, and then we bring them back in and do a clinical session, which we can do over Zoom as well, where now that you've gone back into your life, any remaining stickiness, any remaining self-limitations around your intention are obvious. And we now bring you back into trance, and we systematically identify, reframe, and release any of those. And the end result is like tying a bow around the whole thing, right? The end result is an incredible amount of freedom and confidence and groundedness and clarity of purpose and clarity of gifts, and the motivation and the love and the energy to move through your gifts in service of others, and spiral upwards, right? Live a fully human life. Does that make sense?
It does, and it sounds incredible, man. So while you come through BC, are you offering both the psychedelic individual experiences plus the hypnotherapy? Yep. You're doing a combo package, or can you do one or the other? Walk us through kind of what that might look like.
Great question. So it's all of those things. So a LifeCraft therapy session is 2 hours, and that's available to everybody. And actually included with LifeCraft therapy is a 3-week coaching runway. So we have a system of coaching where, we know all the things that you're going to bump into, making deep soul level behavior change and coming into alignment with your soul's purpose. And we're here to support you through those. So after your session, we're with you actually forever, but we have 3 weeks of systematic programming to support you through that. So LifeCraft therapy is a 2-hour session. And journeys, we can do anywhere between a single day format where everything's in the one day, with the exception of that integration session, which comes after, or we have a 3 or 4 day format. And I have room for all of these things. So people who, if you want to do an individual journey, I can do that in your home with you. If you want to do a multi-day journey with a group of friends, we can get an Airbnb, and I've got contacts and connections. I've got everything I need. I can turn these around very quickly. We have team members all over BC that have had our sitters training and can come in and facilitate journeys with us. So, and one other thing I'll say is that in our journeys, we have a 1-to-1 ratio of sitters to journeyers. We make no compromises in these experiences. We're not here to make money doing this. It's a service that we offer because we believe that everyone should have access to this, and they're not going to get it, unfortunately, in our current healthcare system. So we're happy to deliver.
That's so exciting, brother. And like I said, I am having a hypnotherapy session with you January 17th. This is going to be the second time I've done this, and very excited to tap in with you again and see what we can discover. I'm certainly all about continuing my healing journey, and certainly know that it's almost never ending. But I'm excited to have you here and excited to share this 25% off code with the community. If anybody wants Greg's services, get a massive, substantial discount by being a part of this community. And so I'm going to tag you in this video, Greg, so that obviously we'll post it. It'll probably go back up tomorrow. We'll do a little write-up on it. You and I can chat about it before it goes live, and then we'll tag you. But listen, we did have a few questions. Let's just make sure that everybody, first of all, if you stayed with us from the start to the finish, thank you so much. If you missed the first half, I think you should circle back tomorrow and check it out, because it's a very compelling story as to how Greg has gotten here. So a few people are just saying, hey, like, I can totally relate to this, and thank you, man. Thank you for sharing. Lots of love. But we've got Kaylee. Kaylee had a question. Would this therapy be helpful for someone with a dysautonomic nervous system disorder and neurodivergence and trauma?
Yeah, that's a great question. Was Kaylee, you said?
Kaylee.
Yeah, Kaylee, yeah, sure. So neurodivergence, we don't have a ton of clarity on the degree to which neurodivergence is nature versus nurture, or a combination of both. And as it turns out in this work, it doesn't matter, because with this work, we've proven that we can, of course, release trauma, which would be the nurture side of things. And we can also create anatomical shifts in the brain. And we do this all the time with the vagus nerve, right, which is responsible for our autonomic nervous system, our fight or flight, and our threshold for adversity in life, our capacity to buffer stress. These things are determined by our vagus nerve tone, and we can reset that. We've proven that we can actually change people's neurotransmitters and how they work, the concentration of neurotransmitters and your sensitivity through this work, right? The mind-body connection is phenomenal. And so the first thing I'll say is that we have some experience working with neurodivergent people who are neurodivergent, I should say. And so you can feel safe here. We're going to see you. Yeah. And now when it comes to trauma, things that are held in the body, and somatic processing, yeah, that's again on the bullseye of what we do. So just to give you a bit more context, in a LifeCraft therapy session, we're going to bring you down into trance, and we remind your unconscious mind, your only job is to keep, say, Kaylee safe. And you're going to be in trance, and your unconscious mind is going, yes, yes, it is. And we're saying for Kaylee to be safe, she must understand the reason, the cause, the root of blank, whatever experience, belief, behavior, whatever's going on there. And now we do what are called regressions. So I'm going to regress you back to scenes, vivid, vital, crucial scenes, all to do with the root of that thing. And quite often we get taken to past lives. Sometimes, something that's in our unconscious mind, in our soul karma, is from a past life. But either way, we're going to get to the root, always. Yeah, and it's very often an experience that you don't have any conscious remembrance of. But once the scene comes, we get to begin with compassion, right? Like, wow, this makes perfect sense. Anyone who went through this experience could come away with this belief. And we can see how living your life with this belief can lead to changes in the body. We can see how it has stored trauma, sometimes as armor, sometimes as a weight within the body. And sometimes those things manifest as a shifting in our nervous system and how we interface with reality, and also can manifest in disease, right? And so we get to identify these roots, and we get to help the unconscious mind see that this thing that you've taken on, either it was never true for you, it was formed in error, or maybe it was true for you when you were a little girl, but it's not true for you now, right? Like when we're young, when we're babies, we need the approval of our parents to be safe. And then we take on beliefs like that, and then as an adult, we won't allow ourselves to express who we truly are because we're afraid that if we do, we won't survive, right? And so in either case, those unconscious beliefs, whether they were untrue always or true then but not true now, either way, they're not serving you now. And we get to help the unconscious mind see these unconscious beliefs cannot, do not, will not ever serve you again. And the unconscious mind goes, right? Because it thought it was loving you by holding you down. It thought it was loving you by driving this particular self-limiting experience. And now it sees that's not true. Your unconscious mind is not loyal to any belief. It's only loyal to you. And in trance, we can show it, hey, this is safety. And the unconscious mind goes, oh my God, that's true. And now we lead you to these vivid visualizations in trance, living your life in fullness, in freedom, living your life, experiencing your life as you want to, as you feel called to. And as I'm feeding that back to your unconscious mind using neurolinguistic programming and hypnotic language, the unconscious mind is going, taking notes, like this is safety. It can feel this embodied safety, right? And meaning, fulfillment, power, clarity, abundance, safety, 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 safety. So the unconscious mind is like, yes, yes, yes. And now it's as motivated to drive these perspectives, these new, beautiful, empowering, true beliefs, as motivated to drive those as it ever was to drive the things that were holding you down, holding you back. And so we see, first of all, I don't think that neurodivergence is necessarily something that needs to be cured. I think it's beautiful. I think there's this beautiful variety in how our souls interface with reality, right? And so what I will say is that the work we do brings a freedom and a deep self-compassion to people who have been living in a world where they're told, yeah, that's not for you because you're neurodivergent, or you need special this or extra that because you're neurodivergent. And they just feel so enough as you are. So beautiful, so grounded. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, very well said, man. And it's so exciting that you can work with some of these stubborn, depression and anxiety illnesses that just can't really be dealt with through our traditional white collar medicine with, SSRIs and anxiety medication. And it's very exciting work, Greg, man. I can't thank you enough for taking the time and sharing about your experience and coming on and letting us know what you're up to at LifeCraft. I can't wait to see you next week, brother. I can't believe that's already next week.
Yeah.
And yeah, if there's anything else you want to close off with, Greg, I think we maybe just nip this one here. And obviously we'll likely do this again. But if anybody has questions or wants to get in touch with Greg, I can help facilitate that. And yeah, I just want to say how much I appreciate you sharing your story, man. Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it. Yeah, I guess if I'm going to close with anything, it's this. This work has led me into a place where I have this beautiful, intimate contact with people's souls every day. And what I've learned is that we are all beautiful and perfect souls. It sounds so cliche to say that, but it's true. You are so enough. You are so perfect. The universe does not make mistakes. And your soul has come here into this life to learn lessons that don't always make sense to us here, but they have this deep and rich meaning that's available to us. And so if you've ever had any experience of any kind that is anything like, I'm not lovable, I'm not enough, I don't belong here, yeah, those are all illusions that you're here to work through. And as you do, you will step into a beautiful peace, power, and freedom that is your birthright. And I would be happy. I would be blessed to speak to any of you guys about any of that and support you through that. Yeah.
Beautiful, man. And if you jumped in late, I am going to post this up tomorrow. It's going to be available for anybody to surf back through, and I highly recommend you do that. Listen, have a great week ahead. Happy Monday, everybody, and thank you so much for joining. Greg, I'll see you next week, brother. Thank you so much for this. Bye, guys.